So here we are, mid-September, in between eclipses, and preparing for the rest of the year. This video is going to be that. Going to move through some of the energies of the rest of the year, some of the bigger and more important transits as I see them, some of the ways to characterize those transiting energies that I think are most useful to you and to us. The main story is that it's the water element takes center stage, and so we need to break down what the water element is, how it functions, and look at some of the dates where that will be at peak intensity so we can navigate this very wild and crazy time. We're in the pocket now, in my opinion, where all bets are off. These new worlds are going to be coming online here very, very fast. The mundane astrology, of course, is going crazy with the assassination of Charlie Kirk in America and how that's a major event. Setting aside anything you think about him or not, it's a huge triggering event. They're even talking about it here in Southeastern Europe where I am. I mean, this is a major deal, and it's very important to look at that and examine it clearly and closely. And I will say just here out of the gate, that's not this video. I've got a video on that, a few possibly, and I'll be layering in all of the big mundane events as they emerge and unfold into my videos because you have to talk about them. But this is not a video that's like, here's the mundane astrology of the fall and we're going to talk about the important events from that perspective or vantage. Instead, this is more about the interpersonal, spiritual, philosophic, energetic ways that we can maneuver with this energy in our own lives. And of course, we have to be aware and reference the outer world, so that won't be totally absent here. But I will say I'm not going to talk about what appears to be a very explosive eclipse season trigger into very direct geopolitical emergences and domestic American emergences that map and mirror astrological cycle. That's really an interesting topic. Next video or the one after or whatever, very soon I'll get that out, okay? So just hang with me on that. I know a lot of you are watching the news. It's like this fever pitch of intensification as you watch those headlines. And again, that's what eclipse season is. Feeling into intensified realities where things emerge and they just feel chaotic and out of control. Those events in America over the last few days define that. There's other events that have been part of it too. There was a drone incursion from Russia into Poland. Poland triggered Article 4 asking NATO to respond and meet and talk about potential response. Doesn't guarantee a response, but so that happened. There was bombings in Qatar. Israel bombed into Qatar, which created a rift in the Middle Eastern political scene. So there's a lot happening right now during this eclipse season. But again, not that video. So stay tuned for this video. I just wanted to speak to it right here because I know a lot of people are thinking about it. But this video, we're going to break down fall 2025. The water element takes over. The feeling into our realities and the feeling body, how important that is to everything we do in life. So stay tuned with me here. I'm S.J. Anderson. Glad to be here and glad to be walking through this astrology with you. So okay, well, elemental astrology is a big part of astrology. It's increasingly become central to my practice, or pretty central, with a grouping of techniques, but the elements are certainly in that list of several techniques that I use and center and think about often, because what you have often is an elemental out of balancing. There's always a different ratio of the elements in the transiting sky, and so you can often read the transiting sky through the elemental lens. You can say, hey, there's more water here, or there's more fire, or there's more air or earth. And each of the elements evokes themes that you can consider independent of the signs of the zodiac at one level. You can just extract the elemental analysis and then think about that as a theme. And what is the water element? Usually it's connected to emotional body, relationships, inner landscape, creative inner landscapes and relationships in the emotional body. Thinking about the elements, the main distinction, or one of them, is that there's two that are active, and that's air and fire. And we think about active energy, we think about going out into the world, daytime, building, doing, making, communicating, exploring, curiosities, all of that outer world stuff we do, active. And then you have earth and water, which are so-called non-active or reactive, or I just say night is, I think, maybe the best way to do it. Of course, masculine and feminine is an assignation that some people ascribe to this division of the elements, but water is therefore of the nighttime and the earth elements of the nighttime, meaning it's things we do in our private spheres. When we come back from being active, we get into our private spaces and our internal spaces that are private and our home spaces to support ourselves and support the activity. It's the things we do to support action, and it's just as important as action, because without the night energetic, action can't happen. You would just fail. So like anything in astrology, there's these balances where all components are needed. And there's astrologers that do analysis on this. Got to get some water here, sparkling water. Love that sparkling water. So they talk about elemental deficiencies or being overweight an element. Separate issue, not going to go into it here, but I just want to say the water element, biggest player of this fall. So one thing to think about, so one way to think about it. So one way to think about the fall is simply your emotional body, your inner landscape, your beliefs and philosophies, and how you generate visioning and how you manifest from an internal state first, how you go inward and navigate the landscapes of what's happening in your heart, your mind, and your body, and your imagination. And all of these would be key and core elemental themes. How do you nurture your body so that you have the ability to dream and imagine? How do you then use the dreams and the imagination and the inner visioning and the tending to the inner world in order to propel the active phase? So these are at one level. I just would encourage all of us this fall to get inward, go inward. You see a lot in popular philosophy or popular spiritual philosophy, like turn inward. First it's the inner, then the outer, sometimes people say. You clear the inner life, the outer life will follow. And I do think that would be, at one level, a high level aphorism to take and carry with you this fall, is clearing and tending to the inner garden, you might say, as the necessary condition for engaging with the outer world. Let's get specific here. That's kind of the general thing. With the ephemeris, the astrological story starts when Mars enters Scorpio after this second and final eclipse. The second and final eclipse happens on the 21st of September. It's in Virgo, the last degree of Virgo. That next day, on the 22nd of September, Mars will enter Scorpio. And that kind of kicks off this major theme, because upon Mars's entry into Scorpio, you will have planets in Scorpio until Mercury leaves Scorpio on the 11th of December. So all of the fall, except for those final 10 days, we will have Scorpio placements with the faster moving planets. It starts immediately when fall begins, that we have to grapple with the Scorpionic. What do those planets in Scorpio do? They make sign-based trines to Cancer, where Jupiter is, and Pisces, where Saturn is. So immediately it's not just Scorpio we're looking at. We're looking at the reverberations into the other two water signs. And that's why I say the water element at large is one to consider greatly, without going into what is Scorpio, what is Pisces, what is Cancer, because they are all interacting together. All three are pinged and are heightened this fall. And again, it starts upon Mars's entry into Scorpio on the 22nd of September, right after that eclipse. And so it's not just sign-based aspects. You actually get 3 grand water trines that include applying aspects with all of the planets that are involved in the grand water trine. So I want to break those down. I'm going to list the dates of those 3, but you have 3 of those grand water trines emergent here this fall. You have another one with Venus, but by that time Saturn and Jupiter are separating, and so the Venus triggering the Saturn and Jupiter by trine is maybe not as perfect, you might say, in a way, of a grand water trine, but still there if you want to add that in as the 4th one. Forgot to put these dates in my planning document. That's the beauty of the tools we have. I can just bring my laptop over here and read it off from you from here. But the first grand water trine happens when Mercury trines Jupiter on the 24th of October. At that moment, you will have Mercury out ahead of the sun. It's getting long in its cycle as a night planet, and it perfects that aspect to Jupiter by trine. So that's the first one. It's as early as the 24th of October when these perfected water trines happen. You can think about these as peaks of intensification. So it's not that these themes aren't operative all fall, because they are. It's just there may be these moments of peaks. The first one I want to highlight, of course, is this 24 October, Mercury trine Jupiter. And let me pause and say this here. 2 things I want to say here as we pause, as I'm just laying out the ephemeris. One is Mercury will have a complete retrograde this fall. It will station retrograde in Sagittarius. So it goes all the way through Scorpio, hits Sagittarius, stations retrograde on the 9th of November in Sagittarius, and then it goes back into Scorpio and stations direct there on the 29th of November. And so we have a full dividing point. I always think about Mercury retrogrades as a dividing line of any season, because you want to think about it in a chunk. It's before Mercury retrograde station, and then it's after Mercury direct. And that's one thing to just consider here. Few of these grand water trines are happening before the retrograde station of Mercury, and those are the ones that I think are more active and more productive to get into a flow of action. You may want to rest during that Mercury retrograde, and then it's the December moment where you have a lot of active energy that kicks back off, okay? Keep that filed away. You want to plan around this Mercury retrograde. And the second thing for context here is that Jupiter and Saturn do not perfect their trine. They get very close, and then they begin to separate as Jupiter retrogrades. Starting on 11 November, Jupiter will station retrograde and then begin moving backward. Saturn doesn't catch Jupiter to perfect their trine before Jupiter picks up speed. And so just keep that in mind. I'm not going to even dive into that. I'm delineating this as basically perfected aspect effectively. The date that they get closely applying, the last little moment that they're applying before they separate, is on the 17th of November. That's when they begin to separate, okay? So that's kind of a line in the sand for the Jupiter-Saturn story this fall, is that they begin to kind of weaken in terms of this water element, Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer, peak of beneficent flow or something. I will say. I will say this, and this goes back to the Charlie Kirk stuff, is that the last time these two planets perfected an aspect, Saturn in Pisces, Jupiter in Cancer, was all the way back in 1966. This is why we are back into the political violence era. And that's a separate video, but just a little bit of a preview, is that we're back to the Jupiter-Saturn cycle from that pocket of the 1960s, which included so much political violence, and I won't say more because everybody knows about that. I'm gonna do a video of granular breakdowns and thinking about that and talking about that a little bit more. But this is the reason. And I will say that Jupiter and Saturn do not perfect a trine, Pisces to Cancer, this cycle. The trine actually comes next year when Saturn is in Aries and Jupiter is in Leo. So there's a kind of edging theme, and that's a theme of the video that I'm going to break down later, where right now it's the interstates and the imaginative and the motivational that we're focused on here this fall to prepare for the fire element taking over. It's not only locally this fall, because by the end, in December, you get a 4-planet stellium in Sagittarius to end this fall season. That's when Mercury enters Sagittarius on the 11th of December. You will have Venus, Mars, and the Sun also in Sagittarius when Mercury enters. So we end with a very active, fiery, explorative, energetic. But to get there, even this fall, we have to go through the water and the internal world exploration. But see, then that mirrors the larger cycle, which is that 2025 is very much a water year with so much in water signs, save for Saturn and Aries this summer, and Mercury and Venus were retrograding in Aries earlier in the year. At one level, it's mostly water with Jupiter in the water element and Saturn in the water element for a lot of the year. But next year, see, it shifts to fire. So 2026 is fire year compared to the elemental splay, whereas 2025 is more of a water year. And so one way to think about it again is that we have to prepare here the rest of 2025 internally. It's another major theme I want to extract from the astrology, is that there's internal preparation here for the remainder of 2025. Get your vision down right, get your manifestations clear. Who do you want to be next year when you implement this very fiery, energetic, as Saturn enters Aries in February, as Jupiter enters Leo in June. And it's time to be actively implementing whatever you can envision and prepare for emotionally now in 2025. And so take some time out the rest of this year to really get quiet. Who are you? Who are you becoming? What does it feel like? Imagine the feelings of what you're going to accomplish or do or make or build. Get clear about your motivational structuring so that you can really move in to not only December when we have a 4-planet stellium in Sagittarius after the 11th, but then next year when Jupiter and Saturn get configured in this fire trine. And we're gonna have to be quite active next year, I think, with less time to go inward and prepare at the inward layer. Walk through more of these dates. The next grand water trine is when Mars will trine Jupiter on the 28th of October. So first is Mercury hits the Jupiter trine while Jupiter and Saturn are still applying. Then Mars hits the Jupiter trine while Saturn and Jupiter are still applying. The final one will be the 17th of November, the same day that Saturn and Jupiter separate. The Sun will perfect a trine to Jupiter in Cancer, and so that would be technically maybe the 3rd grand water trine that's all applying. And then finally on the 26th of November, Venus trines Jupiter, but Jupiter and Saturn are now separating. So basically end of October, first half of November is this peak of the flow of the emotional. And these are where some of the best charts are. There's some beautiful waxing charts after the new moon in Scorpio where you can really initiate here, I think, and using the power of Mars in Scorpio as it's finishing out its time there. 1st, 2nd November, some beautiful, beautiful charts. If you're really looking to do something here at the end of the year, Mercury will not be retrograde yet. Mars will still be in Scorpio. Venus will be in Libra. You get a benefic power moment here this fall. Venus will be in Libra 14 October until the 1st week of November. So you have double Mars, double Venus power. Why is that necessary? Well, that's 6 houses in your chart. 2 by domicile, 1 by exaltation for each Mars and Venus. There you go. I mean, it's a very powerful, powerful moment. 2nd half of October, early November, independent of these perfected water trines. So, okay, let's keep going. And And then I'm just going to lay out a few more dates in the ephemeris, and then I want to close with some meditations on the water element again. But we've got, so the 20th is a big day. You've got a new moon in Scorpio, same day that Mercury Cazimi happens, Mercury conjoining the sun. So that's going to be a real purifying energy in Scorpio. I think it'll help us clarify what we're working on this fall and really get clear about how we want to act, what we're building, making, and doing, and how we're preparing for the fire activations into 2025 and into 2026. That's a beautifully close trine that Mercury Cazimi will make to Saturn and pretty close orb to Jupiter. So you're still locking in a lot of that energy even to the 20th. Even though the aspects are separating, it's okay. You still have a strong injection of it. So, you know, these planets, it's Mars entering Sagittarius early November, the Sun entering Sagittarius at the end of November, 22nd, depending on the time zone. Venus entering Sagittarius, Mercury going to Sagittarius first, then retrograding back, and then re-entering Sagittarius on the 11th of December. So as we get into the fall, we increasingly become more active with the fiery expression and the outer world expression. And I guess the last date I have here is 21st of December, Sun enters Capricorn. And then we end the fall. 22nd September, Sun enters Libra. 21st December, Sun enters Capricorn. That bookends this fall period. So one other thing I want to say about this is that Jupiter stations retrograde on the 11th of November. We are sitting here in the middle of September. I'm recording this on the 11th, so 2 months until Jupiter stations retrograde. What does that mean? Well, Jupiter is still moving into new areas in Cancer. And so as Jupiter in Cancer oversees a lot of that first batch of grand water trines, the two that happened before with Mercury trining Jupiter and Mars trining Jupiter, Jupiter's still forward moving, hitting new areas. And so that's one of the main opportunities, and I covered it in the last video and quite a bit in the last few videos. The truth, wisdom, justice, revelation around nurturing and home. That Jupiter in Cancer still is the star here. It's ruling Saturn and Pisces, and it's sending those rays to Scorpio and back into Pisces, these supportive flowing rays. So keep in mind that even maybe hasn't reached its full peak yet, and you get more bites out of that apple for the next 2 months. The retrograde station may be a peak of epiphany, and then maybe we're working back through and pausing with some of that work. But that's a very exciting transit for the fall. Still Jupiter in Cancer, still moving forward, and then aspecting everything in such a lovely way. I want to talk about the water element. I want to come back to the narrative of the water cycle through the zodiac and help us tell a narrative here a little bit, or explore each of these energies a little bit more granularly or individually to put it all together here to help you prep and help you get ready for this. So 1, Jupiter in Cancer. Remember, the zodiac starts with Aries, and then you go through zodiacal order from Aries all the way through until Pisces, and then you repeat the cycle again. Cancer, therefore, is the first water sign in the order of the zodiac, where Jupiter is, the exaltation ruler of Cancer. So I think about it this way. We nurture our bodies. That's what Cancer is. It's the home because the moon rules Cancer. It's Jupiter, which is the bigger truths around the home life and the bodily life. And so one way I see this is like we have to start with getting our home spaces cleared, prepped, ready, and supportive. Think about it this way. I remember there's times in my life where the first thing that happened when you're out on your own is like, I got to get housing. I've got to have a room to sleep in. I remember that. I was living in Portland, Oregon in 2008, and I was like down to my last dollars, and I was like, where do I go? Where do I do? And it was like, okay, I got to get a room. Went to Craigslist, got a room. It was not a very glamorous room. It sucked, actually. But at least I had that place to come back to and sleep. And then I could focus on the next thing, which was get a job. And so it was like that order of events. The home becomes really important as a landing space to then continue on zodiacally. And thinking about that this fall, how are your possessions? And I think there's multiple layers of this, but like, do you have like a smaller set of like a duffel bag if you're a traveler where you can kind of travel light if you need to? You have then maybe the home space, like maybe you want to get a new mattress or some new cooking gear to just make sure that you're safe and protected in your home so that you can handle and maneuver through whatever crazy town next year is going to bring us, or as we get, you know, into these succeeding weeks and months. So, you know, making sure you're making sure your logistical support structures are in place. Okay, that's Cancer. That's the first phase of the water element. Second phase then is Scorpio, the second water sign in this zodiacal story, ruled by Mars, by domicile, no exaltation lord. I'm going to forget triplicity rulers here for now, okay? But it's Mars. This is Mars's water sign. And I've said this and I'll say it again. Mars is about action, passion, making, building, and doing. Why would then Mars rule a water sign, the sign of the night? Well, knowing the clarity of your vision and your emotional alignment with your action is an essential component for acting well. That's why Mars has to come back to the water element. You vision, you go internal, you imagine, and then from that clarification, then you go to the fire. Mars rules water, Mars rules fire. Jupiter rules water, Jupiter rules fire. That's how Mars and Jupiter are connected, is through the elements. And they're both about vision and big picture goals and then exploring in the outer world. It's the inner and the outer. Those two planets connect the inner and the outer very, very well. But when you come to the fixed sign Scorpio, now what we initiated in the Cancerian of the home base, now we get to rely on that and then stay fixed with the vision, using that home base to implement the action and to do what we're here to make, do, and build. So that's the beauty of Mars and Scorpio. It's like, okay, everything's set. Now let me just rock and roll in this groove to produce and function in terms of an inner alignment and being supported by the Cancerian. So, okay, that's the martial and scorpionic side. And then you go to the Piscean, which is that once you've stayed a while building, you're making, maybe there's problems that come up. Maybe you see how you have to adjust or alter. Maybe you have to go back to the vision and get more information. You have to go back into the realm of inspiration to continue on the journey. And sometimes it's releasing the outcomes of the actions. That's how I like to think about this too, is that Mars and Scorpio, we stay fixed in our vision, we make, do, and build. Pisces is about turning it over then, and you let the actions then reverberate with cause and effect, right? The laws of physics then take over. Every action, then there's an equal opposite reaction. We don't know what those reactions are often. Often we can just focus on our fixed clarity and the nurturance we have to support that, but then we get into a dialogue with reality, where, okay, you get feedback now, and then you go back in and reconstitute your vision. That's one element of Pisces. The other element is that we can only do so much, right? We're in an interconnected world. I talked about this in the last video, that there's only so much that is within the domain of our control. The rest we have to ride and be adaptable around, including what we think and believe. That has to all change and alter. And so that's where the Piscean becomes essential, because it allows for imaginative reconstitution as much as we need to, as we let the support drive action, and then we have to reconstitute. New support, new action, reconstitute. This is the flow. The other way to think about Pisces, or maybe another way, is that you act and then you have this kind of creative expression that is also not as controllable. Get into the creative process. You don't know what the piece is going to be like often until it's done. Talk to these filmmakers. They're like, we get to set, we're rewriting the script. They're adapting to the light. They're adapting to what actors maybe can or can't do. Actors rewrite scripts. I mean, everything is a flow of moment by moment reconstituted creative action. That's really how all life is, actually. And so I think that's what the Piscean is telling us. Saturn is there saying, hey, you better be adaptable this fall. There may be walls you're going to come up against, but be quick to rely on Jupiter, those home structures, and then back to Mars, the action as you kind of reconstitute on the fly, okay? All right, so that's the video. It's, I know, not a highly detailed, granular breakdown, okay, but I think it's a thematic offering here that can help you this fall, help you get through this fall, okay? It's a big time in the world and a big time in a lot of our lives, and I think locking in to these more inner motivational sides of things is really going to help us prepare for next year. So that's it. I'm S.J. Anderson. You can follow me here, subscribe to my channel here. I appreciate all of that support. I want to make as many videos as I can here over the next few weeks, because there's so many videos to make, actually. Mundane, as well as these interpersonal conversations. There's just so much happening, and I can't really do it all. So trying to do as much as I can. You know, like and subscribe here, that helps. You can go to my Patreon, support me there if you're so inclined. That helps a lot, frees me up to make more videos and have more time to just give on the YouTube channel in ways that I think are important for everyone out there. So the links are in that description for my Patreon, many tiers that you can support me, even small amounts. Much, much appreciated, okay? So anyhow, inner world, your inner life, motivations for action, getting clear about your purpose, and then moving into some imaginative reconstituting as we get into this fall. It's going to serve you very, very well. I'll talk soon. More videos soon. Mundane astrological videos soon, okay? Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.